Welcome back, and a very special welcome to our next guest. He is Trevor Loudon, a friend and colleague of many years, one of the greatest resources in America today on the enemy within problem and what it means for us both domestically and in terms of our foreign policy. Trevor, it's so good to have you with us, and I want to commend you both for your body of work, notably The Enemies Within, the book and the video, and most recently, Enemies Within the Church, a really indispensable guide to what has been happening to the institution of religion in America at the hands of, well, the Marxist left. One problem that we've got, particularly at the moment on the international stage, is Ukraine. We did a very interesting webinar at the Center for Security Policy yesterday, and I commend to our audience the video if you've missed it at securefreedom.org. It should be up today. I want to ask you about Ukraine, Trevor. We're hearing from many on the right, and we explored this with our guests, the former Supreme Allied Commander in Europe, two prominent Ukrainian American activists, and a man who worked for Vladimir Putin for 5 years in the Kremlin as a chief economist, Andrei Ilarionov. Talk to me about Ukraine and how you see this as an issue that is either, as some would have it, of really no importance to the United States, or something that is of very considerable importance to us as a part of the free world.
Well, I personally think it's of considerable importance. I don't think this is about Ukraine. I think this is about the whole of Europe. I think if Putin is successful in conquering Ukraine, I think the Baltic states will be soon under attack. Moldova, there'll be a direct confrontation with NATO, and that'll put the West in a very problematic position because the West is not really prepared to fight a one front war, especially with the current leadership in the White House, let alone what may happen if Iran joins in and North Korea invades South Korea and China attacks Pacific, and all of them are sending people across the southern border all at once.
Right.
We could be in a 4 or 5 front war pretty quickly.
Mhm.
So I think it's imperative that that Biden does the one thing that he's not really willing to do that could actually put pressure on Putin, and that is to open up the energy spigots in the United States to get cheap gas back in our tanks to supply Germany and Western Europe with much needed energy and drop the price on the world stage to the point that Putin runs out of money. And even even his Chinese help isn't enough. I can't see anything else that's going to work here.
There are those who would argue, of course, Trevor, that it's enough for us to be sending arms to Ukraine. There are others who say, well, no, no, we ought to put ground troops in there, if only to provide humanitarian relief and logistical support to the Ukrainians. Talk through your view of the advisability of those steps.
Well, this is the thing. If troops were going to go in, troops should have gone in before hostilities started
Mhm.
to deter hostilities. Putin has crossed the Rubicon now. He can't go back. He can't retreat because his own generals would probably depose him if he did. It
Mhm.
would be a huge blow to the prestige of the Russian military. I don't think they would tolerate that.
Mhm.
So, really, the problem is now, I think Biden is giving some support to Ukraine, enough to keep them fighting, but not enough to win.
Mhm.
I think really Biden is using this as a way to shore up support during an election year. And you see the Democrats are all in for Ukraine, even though they've been in Russia's pocket for the last 60 years.
Yeah.
And they're getting ready to paint American conservatives as pro Putin traitors. So that's the political dynamic.
Let me ask you about the fact that the Biden team, specifically the president himself, has been in Putin's pocket, the Russians' pocket, for some time. You track these things very closely, of course. You're familiar with what has taken place with his family receiving money from the wife of the mayor of Moscow, a close Putin ally. Um, but more broadly, there is reason to believe that what he had been doing in the not so distant past was really trying to compel the surrender of Ukraine to the Russians. Do you see it that way? And if so,
Look,
is that
absolutely.
emanating from this general wellspring of support for the radical left and Putin in particular?
Look, absolutely. Bill Clinton, and another Democrat with the Russian past, forced Ukraine to give up their nuclear weapons to Russia in exchange for a very nebulous promise of American protection. But if you look at Biden, they say he was a moderate. Well, during the 70s and 80s, he was one of the most left wing members of the US Senate on foreign policy, regularly going to the Soviet Union, fighting Reagan when Reagan was trying to stop communism in Latin America. And Biden owes his entire political career to an organization called the Council for a Livable World.
Mm.
They elected him, they guided him. That was set up by a known Soviet agent, Leo Szilard, to elect members of the US Senate who had worked to demilitarize America, to cut back America's nuclear defenses and negotiate bad treaties with the Soviet Union dash Russia. Biden boasted at their 50th anniversary in 2012 that they had helped, this organization helped he and Obama negotiate the START treaty with Russia that was so good for Putin and so disastrous for America that President Trump had to unilaterally cancel it. Biden has put 5 members of the Council for a Livable World into the State Department, the National Security Council, and into the Department of Defense, all working on US disarmament, when
Yes,
Russia and China have never been more of a threat.
right. And in particular on the nuclear side, and we
Absolutely.
have reason to believe that Putin may, in these circumstances, actually contemplate using his nuclear arsenal. His doctrine calls for doing so, and I think this is no time to be taking counsel from, let alone having policy driven by unilateral disarmers and pro-Putin allies in state or elsewhere. And Trevor, I guess this really gets to the heart of the matter. What you and our previous guest Sam Faddis have done beautifully over the years, in particular since Biden came to office, is really documenting the degree to which this administration, from the president on down, has been compromised, notably by the Chinese communists, but as you've just described, by the Russians as well. And at a moment such as this, how does that affect your expectations that we will do the sorts of things we need to do, whether it's domestic energy supply or whether it's equipping the Ukrainians to fight the Russians decisively? Um, or is this really just an exercise in sort of obscuring the real inclinations of this administration, and perhaps leading to Putin's victory in the end, with the
Look,
detrimental effects that you described a moment ago?
I think the Biden administration is certainly hoping that Putin will win this. And they've worked in the interest of our enemies right through. I think if the Republicans had any sense at all, they would be mounting an impeachment on Biden right now. Don't wait for the midterms. All of this evidence of Biden's treachery, his, I would say, deliberate handing of Afghanistan to China, his green lighting to Biden to go into Ukraine, instead of putting troops in Ukraine or making a red line, Biden basically said, well, if there are limited military incursions, there'll be no US military response. Well, that's as much of a green light as Putin needed, if he
Mhm.
needed any at all.
Yeah.
Um, you know, Biden, for all Biden has really done to counter Putin, he might as well have defriended him from Facebook.
that's that would be harsh retribution indeed, would it not?
Mm.
And Trevor, I guess what you're getting at really is something again that we talked about earlier with Sam, and I know we'll be talking about with our next guest, Jonathan Umland, and that is the extent to which we are in the hands of both a commander in chief and an administration under him that is really more with the Marxist revolutionaries, if not actually part of that team, than it is with the constitutional, patriotic Americans and the republic that they cherish and want to preserve. And this is so frightening because at a moment such as this, as they say in the Bible, we're really finding ourselves facing emboldened enemies and an enemy within as well. And again, no one has done a better job of chronicling the latter problem, particularly, and helping us think through the strategic implications of it than you. Trevor Loudon, we appreciate your time so much. Come back to us soon. Obviously, this is a topic that continues to bear considerable watching. Next up, Jonathan Amord. We'll be talking with him about this and more right after this.